So Kathleen, we're just going over all these acronyms you have after your name. So we have CFP. Is
I
that
do. I am a certified financial planner.
Certified
Yes.
Financial Planner? So you're here to keep me on task. Well, not on task, but to hold me accountable to anything I say and give, so I don't give people bad financial advice. You have your master's in business administration,
Yes.
and you have this new clue. You have a clue.
Yes. It is called CLU sometimes. CLU. It's an insurance designation. It's kind of financial planning, but with an advanced insurance specialty.
Excellent, excellent. And that enables you to any insurance that you can sell, or is that specific?
It's not home and auto insurance. It's just life and critical illness and disability insurance.
Right. Oh, okay. And everyone should have those things, should they not?
Yeah, absolutely. Protection is a key component of any financial plan, the base.
Right. And that's probably. Can you name any wealthy people who don't have all those coverages? Because I'm covered for at least two of those things, I think.
No, I mean, wealthy people will invest in protection. They know that. I mean, it's kind of funny. Like, people will pay $1,000 or $2,000 a year for their car insurance to insure a $50,000 vehicle, but they don't, because it's mandated. They have to. But you wouldn't dream of having a house and not having insurance, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it burned down, you'd want to recoup that money. So if you're not working, you want to be able to not decimate yourself financially.
Makes sense. Yeah, you're insuring your own income, actually, essentially.
Yes, and how much are we going to be? If you make $100,000 and are going to work another 20 years, that's like $2 million, right?
Interesting. There's actually an article today, MNP, which is the very large accounting agency. They surveyed 2,100 Canadians across Canada. Something like 48% of Canadians are $200 away from being like in real deep trouble. Just $200.
Yeah, that came up just recently on my feed. People that are leveraged to the hilt or live paycheck to paycheck, if that paycheck ends or job loss, disability, you have to have a safety net. You have to have an emergency fund. It's crucial. And I find real estate investors like ourselves, we don't like $20,000 sitting there. We want to buy something with it, right?
We have issues, yes.
To put it to work, but you do have to have some sort of emergency set up for life's what ifs, because life's what ifs happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely happen. Cancer is what? 1 in 4 is going to get it. 1 in 2 are going to get it.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I've been hit with a string of deaths from close friends or friends of friends in the last 6 months, 5 of them. And all of them were under 57.
Yikes. Got it. So I have life. I have critical illness. No, sorry. I have critical. Yeah, I have that one too. I have an injury one as well. Anyways, you mentioned emergency funds. So just for everyone's benefit who's listening, Kathleen's not prepared for these questions. She does not have her questions in advance, just like all our other guests. So we're talking emergency funds. So I thought I might as well ask. Like you're a real estate investor. What do you do emergency wise in terms of for yourself and your properties? Do you have a rule of thumb? Like, for example, myself, I like to have 10 grand sitting on the side for each property, as an example.
Oh, for properties. No, I don't do it specifically for properties. Mm-hmm. I do it for just sort of for myself as a whole. Mm-hmm. But what I would recommend for a client is, it depends on the situation. So if we had a couple and he was a police officer and she was a teacher, huge job security, they have disability protection, someone like that could have 6 months set aside of emergency funds. Mm-hmm. If you take maybe someone like you, for instance, as a realtor, mm-hmm. Where incomes can really vary with the way the market goes, or Cherry being an accountant, mm-hmm. and income varying with the seasons, and both of you in sales, people like that should probably have 2 years worth of a safety net. Now, that, of course, is your income that you derive from your jobs. If you've replaced that with real estate cash flow, then that's going to happen really whether you're disabled or not, right?
Right.
It's interesting because your need for disability insurance might be, as you replace your income, might be less and less.
Fascinating. Yeah, I don't think I have 2 years. It's all sitting in equity on my property. I joke. It's not. So I'm joking, folks. Okay. So I've been getting some negative comments. So that's why I'm have to preface this by saying I'm joking. But my insurance plan's sitting in the house. I can turn it into cash in 30 days.
Yeah. I mean, there's different ways to skin a cat, right? Like, so maybe someone like yourself has 4 months, but you have a property that you could sell in 6 months if you had to.
I can sell faster than that. I know a good agent.
How fast can you sell this?
I can sell property real quick. I've sold the property in a weekend before and then closed in like 2-3 weeks. That's something I recommend to anybody. So Kathleen, let's start with why I asked you to come on the show, because someone was saying I didn't know anything about RESP, so I shouldn't talk about it. And to give some context, so my kids are 5 and 3 years old. And so I bought them each a house before they each turned one. And so just my appreciation gains are in the several hundred thousands of dollars. So again, I'm not qualified to talk to RESPs or give advice on these sort of things. So you are qualified. How have I done compared to if I had invested in RESPs?
I mean, fabulous. I think it's hands down a much better decision to get an investment property. RESPs, I think, are really a horrible structure. I was running some numbers myself because we were talking about this, but first of all, the max you can put in an RESP is $50,000 per child, and the max grant you can get on an RESP is $7,000. So probably your properties just did that the first year, right? So, and that's the max grant you can get over your lifetime. If you had invested $50,000, I ran some numbers, and you took that $50,000 and instead bought a house for $250,000, right? That's putting 20% down. That's leveraging it. And let's assume there's no cash flow, but you did a 20-year mortgage and it was paid down. So your 50 would turn into 541, and that's just at a 3% appreciation. At 6, it would be doing double that. So, but if your 50,000 earned 8%, you'd only be at 233,000. So you would, I can't see how you wouldn't be able to do like twice as better in a rental property. Plus, I believe that, we don't know what the future holds. It's very possible your children won't go to school. Like maybe they'll be internet-based learning. Maybe they'll take a trade. Maybe,
trade school's not covered? Is trade school covered?
Trade school can be covered. It depends. It depends where they go and what they do, but it might not be that $100,000 a year tuition fee, for example, right? As an apprentice, they're being paid as they go and things like that. There's all sorts of pitfalls with RESPs too, because I know personally someone whose child, they changed their major. So they went back to first year, and then they wouldn't give them the money because they were doing first year a second time around. So it's very inflexible. The goal should not be to save for a specific thing. The goal should be to be wealthier. And then what you decide to do with your money is up to you, right? Whereas an income property is what I call a multi-dimensional dollar. You can use it for your children's education. You can use it for cash flow now. You can use it for retirement. You can use it for life's what ifs. It's up to you. You've just done a better wealth decision with the investment property than with an RESP. With RESP, you've locked your money into this one strategy, and maybe that strategy won't be what you want in 20 years.
So say I slip and fall and I can't work. Can I access my RESP money?
You can actually. You can, but you'll remove all of the grants, and any of the gain you would be taxed on. But again, for life's what ifs, if all you did was try and be wealthier, that money would be more flexibly available to you.
Right. Even though I was joking, but I can turn a house into cash. Right now in today's market, I can turn a house into cash in 30 days. That sounds easier than dealing with an RESP.
You know what? I might disagree. I mean, in that situation, you might have to refinance the property, and if you're not working. Again, that's what emergency funds are for. We were talking a bit about earlier. We were talking about diversification and diversification. But
sorry, Kathleen. Before we go there, though, who is an RESP good for?
Oh, jeez.
Okay, so hang on. Say you're bearish on the real estate market, because those people exist. That's totally okay if you're bearish on the market and you believe in the stock market or whatever investment vehicles are available to you via an RESP. Is it right for that person?
Well, even in the numbers I ran, the stock market was achieving 8 and real estate was achieving 3. I wasn't being particularly bearish. But when you asked me that question, okay, in my mind I was thinking, okay, what if someone can't come up with 50,000 or can't save, right?
Yes.
And I was thinking, you know what, those people would probably still be better off putting money into their own home or buying a bigger home that grew, and using that money to fund the mortgage on their own home, and then in 20 years be able to access it. So I'm not sure who an RESP would be better for.
Ouch.
I don't know. I can't think of an example.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes grandparents want to do something like that for their child. I guess for someone that had completely exhausted their investments that they wanted, whether that be real estate or otherwise, and had excess cash, but I hate these RESPs. The other thing is that when your child hits, let's say 13, 14, you have to take these RESPs and make them super conservative. Basically, that means bonds, because your child is going to be going to school in 3 years, and if the market crashes, you've got no time to rebound.
Right.
Whereas with an investment property, or even if it's your own home, you're still going to own that asset. So that asset has time to rebound. You can still own that home for another 10 years. Maybe you won't be able to refinance out as much. I get that. But bonds are going to be doing nothing, or worse, they'll go down, right? If interest rates rise, for every 1% interest, a bond fund's going to lose 10 to 12%.
Right, and we're sitting at historic lows for interest rates.
Yeah, but you just can't invest in stocks for a short time, because you run a huge risk. Whereas you could invest in real estate knowing you need to access some of that money in 3 years, and knowing that you actually don't have to sell it to access it. That's a big difference. So it's not just which investment will do better, it's human behavior and what you have to do with it. And I can't think of who should have an RESP. Can you? Who would you?
Before you mentioned the idea of just paying down your own mortgage being better.
Yeah.
And then
let's say it's 2008 and the stock market has crashed 50%.
Oh yeah, you're ruined.
Then I would say go ahead.
Wait. If it's an opportunistic buy, if the timing is opportunistic,
then I would say go for it, because your chance of having a ridiculously stellar return over the next 5 years would be really strong.
Right. Versus we're in the middle of a 12-year bull cycle.
Right.
Cycle's usually 7 years. Do you really want to be getting into the stock market?
Right.
I personally wouldn't. I'd be scared. I'd be holding more cash. Okay, so we've beaten our ESPs to a bloody pulp. So I sent you an article, I think last night. So that's about as much notice as our guests of the show get about anything. Last night. It's now 4 p.m. the next day. So friends of ours, Denise and Stuart McPherson, were featured in the Globe and Mail. because they gave up on investing in stocks. And it happened to work out because they bought a lot of real estate with it, and that afforded them their retirement. And then, if you continue reading on the article beyond that, you see CFPs, like your co-designation associates.
Yes.
Okay, so I think they had two of them. So they had two CFPs in the article who were commenting as well, and they were commenting about diversification. So again, I'm not qualified to talk about diversification. I have very limited diversification in my own portfolio, other than I have properties scattered along Western GTA, GTHA, and across different investment strategies. But that's really the extent of my investment. That's really the extent of my diversification. I own almost nothing in terms of financial instruments. And go diversification.
Well, there's two things I kind of want to talk about. First of all, I don't really believe in traditional diversification that most financial planners will talk about. I really believe that it's not about owning, some financials, some real estate, some like pharmaceuticals. For me, and this is crucial, I like to think about your financial plan in terms of protection, savings, and growth. And you have to have all of those three. So protection would be those insurance components that we talked about earlier. And savings would be our RSPs, emergency funds. And you do need to have those because you do need to have that safety net. Mm-hmm. But what's going to turbocharge your wealth is going to be real estate or stocks. And you can leverage stocks as well. Again, I'm not a huge stock person, but I'm less.
But that's based on timing. It's not because you're. Sorry, I'm putting words in your mouth, but you're not a big stock person. Is it a timing thing or fundamentally or?
Fundamentally.
Got it. Okay.
Fundamentally. With real estate, if you put $100,000 in a mutual fund, and let's say it doubles, so now it's worth 200, whatever that time period is, you made 100% rate of return. But with real estate, you could put $20,000 down and still have that $100,000 home. And now that home doubles and it's worth 200, same period of time, let's say, but you only put 20,000 in. So your return is tenfold, not twofold. Mm-hmm. And that's why real estate over the long term, you have to hold it over the long term, will typically outperform. And it's not that you can't leverage stocks, but you're never going to know as much about your real estate portfolio as you do about your stocks. You don't control what the president of the company does. You don't control what stock markets do and traders do. But they are, and they'll, a good portfolio will plod along. And again, they're a great savings vehicle. RSPs are a good tax tool, but I don't believe that they're going to turbocharge your wealth. I don't believe they're going to prepare people for retirement at all. At all. So instead of diversifying and saying, wow, I have all this real estate, I need to get some stocks, I don't believe that. I think that, okay, I have all this real estate, maybe I should have permanent cash value insurance, and what will that do for me? Or maybe I need to up my emergency fund so that I can take advantage of opportunities in the future, right? Either stock market crash or a real estate opportunity, a credit crunch. You're going to be able to pick up properties in the next recession for a great deal. So emergency fund opportunity money. So I like to think of financial plans in that way. But you talk about diversification versus diversification. The average person that doesn't own, let's say, income properties, owning 10 mutual funds that each own 40 stocks in them the overlap would be ridiculous. And things are a lot closely correlated than one might think. And I don't know that, a pharmaceutical company in the U.S. is that much different than a pharmaceutical company in Europe in terms of exposure. And we saw in 2008, it pretty much hit everything, right? Everything was kind of decimated, bonds included. So I just don't think it's lowering risk for people at all.
Fascinating. So so I don't want to paint all CFPs with the same brush, but why is it pretty common to hear that out of them?
Well, I mean, the cynical part of me will say, well, they can't really figure out a way to make money selling real estate, and that's not their business. Mm-hmm. But they've also been educated that way. There's not really a real estate section in your CFP. If there is, I don't remember. It's teeny tiny. That's just kind of what they're taught, and that's what we've all been taught. You know, here's an analogy I always use. Okay, Steve Harvey. Mm-hmm. Family Feud?
Yep.
Okay, 100 Canadians surveyed. Name a way in which you'll save for retirement, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And 100 Canadians are going to say RSPs, because that's what comes to their mind, first of all. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing. But there are lots of ways to save for retirement. You could pay off your principal residence and do a reverse mortgage. You can own real estate, TFSAs, your business. Non-registered investments might be more appropriate. There's so many ways, and RSPs are just one tool, and I don't think that they're the best tool. I like to think of them more as that savings tool, mm-hmm. a good emergency fund tool. Like if I lose my job or become disabled, it's nice to have $100,000 in my RSP that I can draw on. That's a great safety net. If I have a big tax bill because I sell a property, I can lower my taxes that year. That's a great tax tool, but I don't think it's a great wealth tool.
I heard this the other day that every 4 years now, I think we can use our RSPs to purchase principal residences.
I have not heard that.
That's something to verify it.
I think I know what you might be referring to. If you have not owned a home for 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, you can use the home buyers plan, but you must not have owned a home. So that, that $25,000 RSP loan, home buyers, which I think just went up to 30. Mm-hmm. But just went up, yeah.
So who qualifies then? So if you're renting, so say I own a home somewhere that I rent out, and I live in a rental for the last 4 or 5 years, do I qualify?
No. And if you've owned a home in the last 4 years, you do not qualify.
Interesting.
So if you've never owned a home and or you sold a home over 4 years ago and you rented in the meantime, mm-hmm. and you didn't own any other recreational property or investment property, mm-hmm. then you would qualify for it.
Hey, that's not bad by the government. Like you were just talking about investing in your own home. Like just statistically, I believe renters are much more at risk of default, bankruptcy, all those sorts of bad things versus people who own their own homes.
I like the home buyers plan. Most young people aren't necessarily at a higher enough tax bracket to benefit from contributing to an RSP. Mm-hmm. But for those that are, it's a nice interest-free loan, and technically you don't even have to pay it back. If you don't pay back that 1/15th, because you have to pay back 1/15th every year for 15 years. But if you don't pay it back, then that just comes into income in that year. So, which is typically not all that much. So, for instance, but it gives you an interest-free loan from your RSP and allows you to get into that the real estate market.
Fantastic. Okay, so that's diversification. So then, again, I don't give my guests that much notice. I sent you an email about an hour ago.
Yeah.
Did you have a chance to read it?
I did read it, and I printed it out because I thought maybe I'd read a little bit about it. But I love case studies. I see this all situation. But did you want to summarize the situation?
Hang on, let me just bring it up. Actually, just give me a second. I'm going to grab my phone. It's probably easier that way. But I get financial advice questions from people. Again, I'm not qualified to give. I'm exceptionally aggressive. Would you say that? I'm pretty aggressive with my investing. Actually, I don't even know how to qualify that. Sorry, go ahead.
I wouldn't say, I don't know your situation, but I would say that you are, you found your niche and you focused on your niche. But if you have an emergency fund and you have liquidity, maybe you're not all that aggressive. You've just done well. There's a difference between being aggressive and done well. I don't think you're any different than any other business owner that's invested a ton of their wealth in their business. This is just your business. And it's a business that has a lot more liquidity, a lot more flexibility, and a lot less capital intensive, and you don't need employees, and you don't have to do payroll. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, people forget that about real estate. That's part of the reason why so many people can do it. You don't need staff. You don't need obscene amounts of working capital because our tenants provide us that working capital essentially. All right, let me just get my phone. But again, actually, before I go with my phone, based on my understanding of how the economy is going, I was reading about the States. So for folks listening, understand there's a method to my madness. I'm not just nuts and buying properties without telling my wife about them. There's a report that just came out of the States last week about new developments. New housing starts. So new housing starts to come down. Oh my God, new housing starts are down. That means demand must be going down. Must be an indication of the economy weakening. But if you actually read into it, the feedback from the builders is, so this is a national average, right? So this isn't commentary on any specific market. Again, a national average for the U.S. The comments are, labor costs are going up. They're having trouble finding labor. And also material costs are going up. So what does that mean? That means inflation, right? And also demand is actually outstripping supply. So what does that mean? Right? So you have inflation, so expected inflation based on the feedback from the builders, based on US data, and demand's exceeding supply. What do you think is going to happen? Right? And then the Bank of Canada looks like they're not going to raise interest rates until next year, because they're bearish on the market. So what does that mean to our mortgage payments? And then you also read how we were talking earlier, 48% of Canadians are $200 away from being in financial ruin. But that's 48%. That is up from 46%. I forget what period ago. So the Bank of Canada, they're handcuffed essentially. If they raise rates, they're going to put more people into bankruptcy. And that's something they don't want to do. But also the economy is looking bearish. Because aside from the housing market, what is doing well for Canada? Oil's ticking up lately, but that's really recent, right?
Yeah, but the oil is a long-term problem. I think, I don't know if our oil industry is not going to look the way it looked 10 years ago and 50 years. It's on its way out. So
yeah.
That's another discussion for another time.
We'll see. I keep seeing my neighbors buying bigger and bigger vehicles.
Did you see the quote on Tesla?
Yeah.
What did he say? It goes, in 3 years, if you don't own a Tesla, it'll be like owning a horse.
I don't know.
I'm not going to go that. It's going to go that far, but he's saying it'll be so archaic. The car you own will be so archaic, it'll be like owning a horse.
I can see from my window, I can see at least of the 7 cars I can see, 3 of them are V8 or bigger SUVs.
Yeah.
Right? And I live in the suburbs, right? You don't need a V8 SUV to get your kid to soccer practice or the mall. So, I do believe, things need to improve, but I don't see any change in buying behavior. Even when gas prices went up, when we had that spike before everything went down, I still didn't really see the buying behavior difference. People still use gas. I still have plans to buy gas vehicles.
When it comes to cars and gas, buying behavior changes take a long time, but they do happen. So if gas price doubled, you would see that when people bought their next car, they would change to something more cost efficient. Or when they decided where they wanted to live, transportation might become key. But it takes that's one of those things that takes a long time. It's not like if the price of red meat doubles, we just go and buy chicken, or become vegetarians, right? Because we could do that much, a lot quicker. But the car, you can't sell it and you have it. And so, but it does happen. It will happen. But it takes a lot longer. I don't know how long someone keeps their car on average, maybe 5 years. So it'll happen.
I think part of it is that so many people, like, again, I'm looking at my window. So everyone's property's values have doubled within 8 years. So they've all made so much more money. So so that influences their decisions as well. They have much more, they have larger retirement funds than they expected. So they can splurge a little bit on a V8 Nissan Pathfinder versus getting the minivan.
Your neighborhood's V8s. My neighborhood's trucks.
Yeah, see? So there you go.
Everybody has a truck, and none of them can fit in the garages.
Comical.
They're all too big. Our house included.
Excellent. All right. All right. Need your advice from Janet. That's all we'll give for her name.
Okay.
So hang on. I'm trying to bring it up.
I have it here printed if you want me to read it.
You want to summarize?
Sure.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so she's been listening to your podcast. She loved the one with Dion Berg, a great mortgage agent. Her and her husband are in their late 50s. They bought an investment condo in Scarborough in 2012. They sold it after 5 years. They almost doubled their investment. They paid capital gains, and then they went and bought another one in 2008 in Toronto, and have rented that one out. So she would like to buy another one. However, her husband is saying they're in their late 50s, and they don't really have time for it to grow. Their home is free and clear. They have a small car loan, but they are on the mortgage to one of their son's properties. They're 1% owner, but they're on the mortgage. So the question was like, what do you think she should do? Is it too late to leverage into equity, house, and buy another property, or not? So, now, congratulations, I would say, first of all, on getting into real estate. I think that's great. And I'm glad that you took action versus not taking action. But I guess one of my questions would be, why did you sell that property that doubled? Because when you did that, and this is advice for everybody, when you bought a property that you sold or are planning on selling in 5 years, then you have to pay that capital gains tax. And now that money is gone. It can't work for you. So instead of having let's say like a $500,000 property and buying another $500,000 property, you've got less money to work with. So you've got less growing. So when I recommend people to buy real estate, I really try and recommend that they buy something that they can hold for a very, very long time and postpone those taxes for a very, very long time, which can also be done. If you think you're going to be selling, maybe own it in a corporation. So that would be one recommendation. Now, they bought another property in Toronto, and I guess my question would be, does it even cash flow? That's the problem. Like Toronto, you may get great appreciation, but usually you're funding it with condo fees and whatnot. It's rented out. But my advice would be to, yes, get another property, but a property that cash flows. So they don't have to necessarily worry about leveraging and waiting for it to double or grow and then to use that money in retirement. Mm-hmm. If they buy a duplex or a property with an accessory apartment, they can borrow against their house to buy it, and the cash flow from that property should pay their line of credit expenses plus the rent to cover property taxes and the new mortgage and cash flow. So it should be putting them in a positive cash flow position. I don't know what what other savings they might have, but if they buy right, so maybe they don't buy in Toronto, maybe they buy in a secondary market or a tertiary market that has great cash flow and still has appreciation, but great cash flow, they'll be fine. And maybe it's worth considering even selling the Toronto condo, because they'd probably be able to pick up 2 high cash flowing properties for the value of a Toronto condo, likely. But again, without knowing all the numbers, I think they're fine. What do you think? What would your advice be?
I think we can tell people what the best investment is until we're blue in the face, but many people won't do it. For example, many people are just afraid of doing renovations or hiring a contractor or investing in an out of market. For example, these folks, I'm going to guess they're in either Scarborough or Toronto. They may not want to invest in Lindsay or Hamilton. Right. So what would you suggest to someone who wants to stay local? For example, we're in a lucky period right now that we can still cash flow on property. I think those are days that are limited. We maybe have 5, maybe I doubt we have 10 years. Say we have 5 years left. We've been lucky these past 10 years that we've all been investing, that we've been able to buy something and be able to cash flow. So what if these people, because I've been saying this to people, the investment you do is better than the investment you don't. Yeah. Right? Don't be blind and make completely silly decisions on what you purchase. Make an educated decision. But say the person prefers condos. They're comfortable buying within a 5-kilometer radius of wherever they live, whatever, for example. Would it be advisable for them to say, put more cash down in order to make a cash flow? Say they do have cash sitting on the sidelines.
Well, yes, except in this case, they were borrowing to invest in it, so it wouldn't make any difference, right?
Yes.
So they just have higher line of credit costs.
That doesn't help. No, that doesn't
help this case, but they might consider cashing out some other investments and run the numbers. Let's say if I take $100,000 extra out of my RSP and pay the tax on it, would I be better off? Would it create more cash flow in retirement? Mm-hmm. It's very possible that it would. Than keeping it in my RSP and growing it at 8% and turning it into an income, in the future. Run those numbers, because generally speaking, if you're going to own a property for a long time, you'd be better off to take a little bit out of an RSP to make the property cash flow. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The other thing that they can do is to get a mortgage that's readvanceable, which means every time you pay down principal, it frees up line of credit room. And what that does automatically is create emergency fund, create greater cash flow if you need it. So a good mortgage is worth its weight in gold in terms of helping you for wealth strategies and whatnot. And talk to Dion about that. That would be a great strategy, because talk to a mortgage broker like Dion that focuses on investment properties. Mm-hmm.
That was actually my first thought. Someone needs to dig into the numbers in order to be able to give good advice versus two of us on the podcast.
You want to invest locally, but I would suggest maybe they consider doing a joint venture. I know that we do joint ventures. So if they do a joint venture with someone, and then after, let's say, a 5-year period, they can completely own it outright or refinance all the money out or whatever, that would be a better strategy. But I think the trick really is going to be a 2-kitchen property, and you just can't do that if you want to get a condo in Toronto.
Right. You could. It just wouldn't make any sense.
It's just not going to, cash flow. And that's what they want retirement income, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and that's actually their email is actually a bit, I don't know. What is the right year to have your house paid off? How old should you be to have your house paid off? And
it doesn't say in the email when they want to retire. So they say they're in their late 50s.
Yeah, so, should have retired 10 years ago.
I mean, if they want to retire, let's say they're 57 and they want to retire at 60, they have to get a 2-kitchen property in a Lindsay or a St. Catharines or a Midland that cash flows. Mm-hmm. They can't go into a Toronto property that's going to cost them that much money.
Mm-hmm.
goal is not a long-term appreciation at this point. It's cash flow.
Right. Yeah, at this age, I don't suggest a negative cash flow property.
No, not at all. So.
Unless they're really comfortable, they have a lot of savings somewhere else that we don't know about, and they're trying to buy something for like a grandkid or something.
But I mean, they have a Toronto condo as an investment already, and they probably live in Toronto, so they've got good exposure to Toronto proper.
Mm-hmm.
So now their third property should be a cash flowing 2-kitchen property. And there's lots of ways to do that.
Mm-hmm.
If it's further away, they can have either a joint venture partner or a property management company. If they're afraid of renovations, you said something interesting I was reading. When they buy real estate through your organization, you set them up, is that right, with contractors? And
we introduce them to the same ones that we use.
That's a huge plus. A huge plus.
That just makes common sense to us. We want to see our clients successful.
No, it's a huge service for sure, right? Mm-hmm. It's a huge advantage. Mm-hmm. So.
And also to give some context though, because I know other agents do that as well in different markets, but ours is a little bit different. Like, we are a major referral source for our contractors, versus if you're just someone who's passing along a name. Like, we actually have leverage, right? For example, we will come down on our referrals if they don't come through. Right. And coming down on them just simply means we stop sending them referrals.
Also, the difference is that the referrals are experienced with legal secondary suite.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So another realtor might just be recommending, a drywall. It has to be a contractor that understands that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's a bit of an expertise there for sure.
Yeah, because we've actually seen we've actually even seen clients of ours, they brought their team from a completely different area that was like 2 hours away, and then immediately they were red flagged by the city. I was like, wow, first of all, that was harsh. Second of all, I thought it was kind of silly that you would try to bring your team to a different city.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like city people are I won't go into it, but man, I'll just say in general, sometimes egos get in the way and people just want to slap down on someone who comes off as being professional.
Well, we have that a lot up in cottage country. So if you try and use your own and you're not using, the local town electrician.
Yeah.
They go through everything. But if you use the local one, then they get, I don't know if they get away with more or just easier process. But
yeah, they're comfortable with who they know. Probably don't trust anyone from the outside. But that's harsh. Like labor's short in almost every market in Ontario.
Yes.
So what are you supposed to do? Wait for that one guy to be available?
You have to have a team set up, and that's one of the advantages of working with a joint venture partner. Mm-hmm. But you have to have that set up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it takes a little bit longer, right? So for flow to work.
Awesome. Kathleen, thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure. I always love coming on your podcasts, and it's always good to chat.
Yeah, we should make this a regular thing whenever I get myself in trouble again for giving out financial advice. Oh, I was gonna say, my current property, the one I just bought, will not have 2 kitchens in it. We're gonna probably make it a student rental.
You were talking about Airbnb-ing it too, right?
That's another property.
Oh, it's another. Okay.
Yeah, that one became vacant, and then man, I've been hearing such good things about short-term rentals. The amount of protection that you have, the tenant profile, because you have their credit cards, and just the market for short-term rentals. These are people on vacation. They come to your city to a vacation because they have budget. Versus we often have tenant issues when they've run out of budget. Right? So it's very different person that's coming to rent your property. So.
Yeah, I'd like to learn more about that myself. So I don't know if that's the future for properties as well. So I don't know what the market is for properties like that in the suburbs, Airbnb in the suburbs, but it's on my list. I was checking out, I listened to your Air DNA podcast. I was on that website. That's useful.
It seems to be working everywhere. I think it's more it's just a simple supply and demand thing. I don't think it's necessarily a suburbs thing, because all the properties that I've looked at are suburban, of course, highly dense areas work well, but you're likely to run into more competition as well. Because if you're in a dense area, you got to think there's hotels in your area as well.
So, are they coming to Hamilton on vacation, or is it more like they're renting out a house while their other house is being built, or they're visiting family and want to have their own rooms, or
it's everything.
It's everything.
For example, like with short-term rentals, I think if you're an area expert, you're all the more powerful. For example, the example I gave is I know the PGA is doing the Canadian PGA in Hamilton. I know the exact days are there. So those are the days I'm going to raise my rents. So I will make more money than anyone else will. And then also when you network with people who also have short-term rentals, you learn what's going on. So, Betty Cloet, who's one of our clients, she's been getting a lot of people, like you said, their house is being built or their house is being rebuilt, as in they had a massive issue with the home, fire, flood, and they're out of the home. They need something immediately. And so they rent from her. And then insurance pays for that, which is wonderful, which is a wonderful customer to have. And Hamilton has a fair amount of tourism. Like there was a K-pop band, a Korean pop band that was touring, and I believe the only Western Canada location they did was in Hamilton. Sorry, the only Eastern location they did was in Hamilton. Actually, it's happened before as well. When Paul McCartney came to Canada, he did Vancouver and he did Hamilton. So you can imagine what the short-term rentals were like when he was in town.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, we have, was it Cops Coliseum out there? And Oshawa has the Tribute Center. And lots of great venues to play there, acts play there.
And then if you're in an area with lots of employment too, like I know my friend Charles, whose house is in Westdale, they get a lot of employees of the university. So they're just traveling employees. Maybe like business people that are coming to for a week and but it's just a simple thing. Like you can try Airbnb, or you can just poke around other people's ads on Airbnb just to see what their availability is like.
Yeah, that's a good idea too. I would love to try it out. It's just you really got to invest in quality beds and staging it. And so it's something that you should probably at least give it a shot for 6 months to a year. So. Well,
the first step is just do the analysis to see if there's demand and if the numbers work for you.
Yeah.
And then do your sensitivity testing based on like 40%, 60%, 80% occupancy.
Right.
Yeah. But and then listen to my podcast with Brian Curo, and then I'll have Betty Cloet on my podcast soon. She's just waiting for her new website to get up, and then she'll come on the podcast. But she is a wealth of knowledge.
Good.
Yeah, fantastic. Again, Kathleen, thanks so much for doing this. Oh, how can people follow up with you if they're interested in following up with you for non-traditional, non-diversification financial advice?
Sure. I have a Facebook group called Durham Money Matters they can join, or they can go to my website and join. It's kavwealthstrategies.com. Or my email is nice and short, VWS, so Victor Water Sam at live.ca. Any of those ways you can connect with me.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you again for doing this. Any final words you want to share on growing wealth? Just real estate? That's the only good way to grow your wealth? Small business, I imagine.
I don't know. I mean, obviously it's what I focus on. We have 10 properties ourselves. And I guess I walk the talk. So, but a holistic plan. I recommend people work with a holistic financial planner that can look at their whole financial situation, not just a mutual fund representative. There's a big difference in that. And if they want to get into real estate, work with an investment-focused real estate advisor. Get yourself out there to the networking groups and connect with like-minded people. that's sort of what I suggest. So.
Fantastic. And we'll see you at the next iWin event?
Absolutely.
We're having dinner. Isn't that sweet?
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks again.
Okay, thanks.